All right. So my name is April Shepard and welcome to Lily's Show and Tell. Lily stands for Lifelong Information Literacy, and we are a group of librarians and information professionals who work to promote lifelong information literacy. If you want to know more about Lily or join Lily, or if you have an idea for a presentation, I have my email into my Zoom name, so you can email me there. I'll also put it in chat in a moment. Before we begin, I just have a couple really quick housekeeping things. First of all, if you're not speaking, please make sure your mic is mute. Please be respectful of others. And then third, feel free to put any questions you have in chat. I'm going to keep an eye on chat while Matthew is talking, and we'll try and make sure we get to everything at the end. So I'll keep notes of everything. And then finally, I want to thank the Lily Web Committee. They're the ones who put these together. They maintain the Lily website, put the show and tells together, find the participants. So they're doing a really great job. Now to our speaker. Matthew Chase is a librarian at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences. At the university, Matthew manages the San Marcos Campus Library, providing instructional services and research consultations to students, staff, and faculty. He coordinates digital exhibits, health and wellness services for the university community, and workshops on exclusive and intersectional research practices. And all right, Matthew, it's all on you.
Thank you. Yeah, let me just share my screen really quick. Perfect. All right, I think you all should be able to see that now. But yeah, hi and welcome, and thank you everyone for joining this session. I'm really excited about this because it's one of my first ways I can kind of share with others in terms of this really unique tool that will hopefully help you out with information literacy and instruction, both if you're on an academic library setting or in a public library setting or any type of library setting. I think this could be readily utilized in different ways. But yeah, as the title is, it's about information literacy in 3D, basically using a tool known as Mozilla Hubs to enhance teaching and learning experiences, or at least provide a very immersive, very customizable and interactive component to your usual information literacy type of instruction, pedagogy, and so on, and services in general at your institution. So thank you, April, for the really nice introduction. Just to kind of reemphasize, yeah, my name is Matthew Chase. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a librarian at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, which is a graduate degree offering institution that focuses, as the name suggests, on health sciences, mainly on physical therapy, occupational therapy, and other allied health professions. So that's kind of where a lot of my expertise kind of lies as a librarian at the moment. And yeah, and I also have my email as well on the chat here. I'm also going to share it on the slide. I also will share it in the chat as well. But yeah, so this is one of the things that has been a strategic goal within the institution at University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences, is mainly to really up our game when it comes to virtual teaching. Especially, I'm sure everyone's kind of having that same type of need, especially in our current climate. But especially for us, like a lot of the teaching has largely been in person on campus. So when we transitioned to virtual, it was somewhat of a challenge. But we've been able to try to identify different ways where we can be interactive, be just as immersive as we would be in a normal in-person type of classroom. And so this particular tool, I think, has been really helpful for us, both at the library and just for our faculty as well. And it, just kind of give credit where credit is due. I would not have known about this particular tool if it weren't for Rosa Rodriguez, who is a outreach coordinator over at the California State University of San Marcos. Just got to give credit, like in terms of referring to me in terms of this resource. But I've done a real deep dive the last about year and a half actually regarding this particular tool. So I'm really excited to share it. So for today's agenda about this show and tell session is basically one, to explain what is Mozilla Hubs, in case you're not aware of what it is, and so on. And we'll do a short demonstration and walkthrough of a basic virtual room. So I'll show like how you can create one. It's gonna be like super straightforward. So once I show it, I'm sure you're gonna be able to replicate it just as easily. And then, yeah, and then eventually once I kind of show all the different like features and settings of like a basic kind of walkthrough, I'll invite you all to join it and be able to interact. There might be some limitations, but I'll talk about that in a moment. And then next, we'll actually explore one of like an example that I kind of wanted to show to all of you regarding how to use Hubs or Mozilla Hubs in a instructional format. And in this case, exploring the cognitive bias labyrinth, which is something that I created and I'm pretty proud of, actually. And then also we have Q&A, obviously, and we can discuss any questions, any need for clarification, or any other things that you might be interested in. But yeah, so with that, let's move on. So basically, let's start with what is Mozilla Hubs? If you're not familiar with it, it is actually an open source platform that you can create fully customizable and interactive virtual 3D spaces. And basically, this particular tool is supported on most web browsers. I haven't actually seen any limits when it comes to web browsers in that case. Mobile devices, there can be some limitations, but it is accessible to any mobile device as well. But I can talk about those limitations in a bit. And also VR headsets. As far as I know, it pretty much supports most VR headsets like Oculus and Vive and so on. Maybe some of the newer type of headsets may not have as the best support, but for any of those tried and true ones that we're currently developing, such as the Oculus and the Vive, yeah, you can definitely use them as well. And it's a simple login and it's optional. You don't actually have to log in. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to install any type of software that's particular for this tool. It's pretty much exists on the open web. And if you do want to do a simple login, which there are some perks to doing so, and I can illustrate that in a bit, but it's a simple email verification. You don't even have to create a real account, like in the sense of an email and a password. There's no password required. You just have to verify your email. And essentially, that's how you create an account. It's easy as that. So, I could probably do the whole hour in terms of doing a PowerPoint presentation of this or a slide deck, but why should we do that when we have Mozilla Hubs to kind of illustrate here and kind of do the teaching for us? So let's get in there. So I'm going to head over to hubsmozilla.com. I'll put the link in the chat if you'd like to follow along. But yeah. Essentially, this is the center place of where you can access Hubs and Mozilla, and it has a bunch of different features, and you can already see I'm already signed in. I'll talk a little bit more about how you can sign in, but honestly, it is like essentially you'll probably see a login page, and all you have to do is just sign in with your email, verify it on your email. They'll send you an email response, and just verify through there, and you're pretty much set to go. But yeah. And if you're wanting to know how to even create a room, you can just simply create room right here. That's essentially the button where you start with. And we'll start loading one up. So I'll eventually invite people to this one, but I kind of wanted to give a few pointers on how to really use it. So immediately when you create a room, it automatically generates a random room that no one else has. Like it's just yours, like it's already unique to you. So you don't really have to do anything in that end. Basically, with the options here, you can do join room, which you can just do if you're using the device that you're using right now. So in this case, I'm just using Chrome browser on my computer. I could just join room there. If you do want to join from an external device, so not the device you're using right now, you could do that through your VR or a VR headset or your phone, and it'll essentially give you a code that you can just enter from there. But we don't need to do that, at least on my end. And then spectate. Spectate is essentially if you don't want to actually join the room fully where you can interact with it, that can be an option as well. You could just kind of look at everyone, but you won't be able to actually hear anyone, or you'll be able to hear people, you won't be able to speak or anything like that, and people can't hear you. It's kind of like a bystander kind of spectation type of view, essentially. But yeah, we'll just join room right here. And it'll give you some options about your microphone and speakers. I already have it defaulted to where it just mutes. If you're a first-time user, it will just kind of like unmute yourself for the first time. So you want to make sure when you're actually joining to do that. But yeah, and then you can just test audio, kind of like how you do with like a Zoom call or anything like that. And we'll just enter. And essentially, this is it. This is how it already loads it up for me. Mainly because it's a very simplified room, so there's not a whole lot for it to have to load. If you do make a much more complex room, which we'll talk about in a bit, it may take a little longer for it to load. Or if you have a really fast internet, I'm just using my campus internet, that also helps. So if you want to use your institutions, that's probably also a really good go-to as well. But yeah. So this particular room automatically already has like some instructions here. And actually I have a small handout, which I'll link in the chat. Also have it shared on the Lily page as well after this whole session as well. But yeah, let me share that with you. It's basically a Mozilla Hubs basics kind of guide, kind of showing a lot of these different types of tools here. So as you can see, when it comes to moving, you can either just use the WASD keys and move around, like strafing from right to left, forward and back. You can also use the arrow keys if you're using a keyboard as well. If you're using a phone or if you're using a VR headset, they do have obviously more unique controls, and I do actually have those the basic ones illustrated in that guide I just linked. But yeah, and then if you want to look around, basically you just have to use, like if you're using a keyboard and mouse, you just have to click and drag and just kind of look around. You could do that. Or if you want a quicker version, you could also do the Q and E keys on a keyboard and it'll rotate you pretty seamlessly. And I actually kind of prefer that way. It's actually a little bit easier for me to kind of move around, but the drag is pretty good if you need to be a little bit more specific. But yeah. And so, so there's a bunch of other, tools as well. If you want to move around and so on. I noticed someone actually asked if there is a avatar, and there actually is. Basically, when you're a first-time user, I believe it should pop up automatically, like a way for you to rename yourself and to create an avatar. Just because I'm already logged in and everything, it already recognizes me, so I don't really have to do that automatically. But on people, I'm going to show, it's actually going to show a list of any users that are currently with me. And it already shows me here. So I can click on my name and I can actually change my name if needed, or I can change my avatar. I actually created one that was very similar to me, or at least as close as I could. But yeah, you can totally change your avatar. And let's say like we want to go to like featured ones here. There's a whole bunch of different fun type of avatars. It usually generates like one of these basic ones, like the Firefox and a space person or so on. But you can easily change that when you actually get in. So yeah, thanks for that question. But yeah, and so you can just close it and then just pretty much once you change your avatar, it'll reflect that, and then you just have to hit accept, and that's how people will see you and how they'll see your name. Your name pretty much hovers right over your head, essentially when you're interacting with people, and you'll be able to see that when I get to invite people. But yeah, essentially this whole room is pretty in depth. Actually, it already has a bunch of different settings and scenery added into it, some benches and whatnot. And so you can just keep walking around and explore. It's really interactive in that sense. So there's a lot of potential in terms of like what you can place into here. And that's the thing too, is that these are actually editable to a certain capacity, depending on what you want. So for that, I want to talk about some of these different button options that are located here, because I'm sure you're probably wondering what they all do. So in case you want to invite other people, and basically, so with Mozilla Hubs, when you create a room, it's pretty much private to yourself. No one can actually find this particular room unless they know the link. And basically, the link is provided here. You could do that, or you could do an invite function right here at the bottom left. You can do a room link and just copy it and then give it to people, whoever you would like. You can give them the room code. Usually, like they just have to go through hub.link, but honestly, I just find that providing the room link is just as well. You can even do an embed code, which I recently found out last year, which was awesome, because you can actually, if you have a website or some sort of web page where you actually want people to just automatically be able to interact with it, just from the website, you can actually embed the code. It works pretty well, actually, from the few uses I've done. So they don't necessarily have to go to the website here. They could just interact from whatever web page you want them to be interacting from, much like how you embed like a video and such. You can also like unmute yourself and mute, so you can do that as well. And so one of the things to keep in mind in here is that with the voice, any audio within a room is spatial. So it actually depends on how close you are to the source of the audio, whether it's the source of maybe some music file that's located in the room, or next to other people. So the closer you get to people, the more you can hear. And it actually goes kind of like binaural, like left to right type of thing as well. So it's kind of neat in that sense as well. So in case you can't hear someone, it's likely that you're just too far away from them, as you would be in real life. You can also do a share. And you can share your web camera if you would like to, or you can even share portions of your screen as well. So you can kind of see here that's allowing me to do that if I wanted to. And you can share a window, you can share a Chrome tab, anything like that. Yeah, it seems to be loading a little slow on this end. That's fine. But yeah, and then essentially there's other types of features as well, which I'll get into as well. There is the indication for place, which is that center button on the bottom there. It essentially allows you to actually add items as needed. And then you could also do a react, which is like emoji reactions as well. Seems to be loading a little slow on my end. Apologies for that. One moment. I've actually never seen it load that slow before. Let's see. Of course, the one time I need to present it, it has some little technical issue here. That's fine.
So while it's doing that, why did you
Sure.
choose Mozilla Hubs over Second Life? Because Second Life is having a second life.
Sure. Yeah, I know Second Life has been really popular. It's actually one I explored years ago, and I just never touched it again at some point. But yeah, it has kind of made its own resurgence lately. I did like this one though, just because like it did seem like it was pretty interactive. You can actually, one of the really cool things that I can show later is that you can actually embed and maybe Second Life does this as well, but I kind of like the way Hubs kind of does this. Is where you can actually load in files of different types. Like I was actually going to showcase like something about, let's see, PDF files, video files you can actually embed in there, and other types of links as well. I'm going to just close the program really quick. There we go. I'm just going to share my screen. It's easy enough to join back in, so that's a good thing actually about it. Let's see.
It's probably just the interaction between that and Zoom.
It probably is. Yeah, you're probably right about that. Yeah, but easy enough. Luckily, I didn't have too many tabs going on at the moment, so easy enough to restore everything as needed. So I'm just going to create a room and then start sharing again. There we go. Perfect. So I'm just entering the room again, just doing a join. As you can actually see, it does like a funny title for the room each time. So anytime you do a random generated type of room, it's just going to rename itself. And I'll show you how you can actually rename that, because sometimes like you do want probably a much more professional name for it, depending on what kind of setting or what kind of context you're working with. But yeah, let me just join here again. So yeah, there is the share function with that. Normally it works. That's the first time it's ever done that to me. So of course it had to happen now, as of course. But with the place, this is where I was actually kind of talking about in terms of like embedding like kind of like real life things, like actually like some files that you might have, images, PDF files, anything like that. You can definitely embed into here. And there's a couple different options as located with this place button. The pen, just to begin, is basically just a basic, like just drawing kind of instrument. Essentially, it will erase itself after a while, but yeah, that's one thing you could do with it if you need to. There's a camera as well, which maybe we can have some fun with, because you can actually create like selfies of your avatars. Oops, I'm gonna just turn off my pen right there. There we go. But yeah, you can easily just like do a picture of yourself, and I'll do it right now just as an example. But yeah, maybe we can have some fun with that in a bit when everyone's in here. But yeah. So it automatically generates a picture, and I can already see it, and I can even tweet it if I wanted to, but I'm not going to do that right now. But yeah, so you can easily interact with it. So basically what I'm doing right now is just I'm clicking on it and just dragging it around. So you can just move it around as needed. You can also do GIFs. So it essentially already has like a collection of GIFs. I think it's mainly through Giphy, if I remember correctly. But yeah, you can even generate all of these. So I'm gonna do the crying type one. So I can easily do that. Because it kind of interprets it as a video, you can actually pause it if you wanted to. So anyone who's actually in the room could do that. And this is like kind of like the fast forward button and the rewind a bit. If you wanted to do a little bit more options with it, like say you wanted to kind of move it around a little bit more or make it larger, you could technically open up the object menu, which is basically on a keyboard. It's the space bar, and you press and hold it, and you can basically do a couple different options, like rotating it as kind of demonstrated here. So if you want to like straighten it a little bit, you can definitely do that. You can also do enlarging. So I'm basically kind of like doing a scroll of it and being able to enlarge it. So it's a much larger image than where it was, and so on. And so one of the things too, if you ever do need to delete it, you can either right click on the image, which kind of brought me to this kind of menu option here, where you can see a link to it. The links don't really work too much like in this sense, so don't worry about that. This is kind of just a view button, and like to pin, which I'll talk about in a bit, but you can also just delete it if you wanted to. You could also open up the tab again using spacebar button, like I mentioned, and also just do the trash icon here. And basically you can just delete the thing entirely. And I can even do the same with the camera. But yeah. And you can also see where the spawn points are for if you press and hold the space bar. Essentially what I'm seeing is kind of like the spawn places, so our spawn locations. So this is where people would pop in randomly as people join. But yeah, there's also 3D models, which is actually a really cool feature. So basically, Mozilla Hubs is connected to a couple different other websites that allow people to create and share 3D model codes, and actually you can use them and teleport them into here. So I'm going to show off with like the 3D models. Basically, it's through Sketchfab. I believe there's also another one for Poly as well. And basically you can spawn pretty much most of these objects in. One thing to kind of keep in note though is some of them might be broken. There's been a few that I kind of find here and there, and I think it's more actually to do with the Sketchfab link than anything to do with Hubs Mozilla. But for the most part, they all kind of work. So I could generate this one in particular, so you can already see it's loading. So one of the things to keep in mind, though, is that some of these objects or 3D models can be really complex in terms of the amount of frames it has, stuff like that, just in terms of the general code. So it can take a little longer to load. And the other thing that could happen too is that it can make it harder for some users, especially if you're using a phone or a VR headset, to load into the room, and it might be the room might be a little slower to you because you're having to process not only the constructed room but also any objects that have been added into it. So yeah, so you can see I can fully interact with this particular object, which is really neat. And I can place it anywhere I want. And again, if I press and hold the space bar, I can basically trash it. I can rotate it as needed, or I can clone it. I can even duplicate items if I wanted to. So that's really neat. It's pretty seamless that way. And then also pin. So basically, this is one of the perks of actually having an account before you start using Room, because by default, if say I wanted to leave this room, basically through the bottom right here, and I didn't have an account, I never verified my email, I just kind of entered this as normal, and you can pretty much have all the same features as I'm talking about here, but the pin option allows you to actually keep an item where it is even when you leave the room. So say I didn't have an account, I didn't log in, I left the room, but I had all these other objects that I placed inside the room before I left. Essentially, unfortunately, all those objects will disappear. The room will remain, but anything that you've added new to the room will disappear. So if you want to make sure that the object remains there, I definitely recommend signing in, and then you'll be able to essentially pin any objects, and it can't be moved. Like I'm clicking on it right now, I can't move it. And it will stay there even when I leave the room and come back. So it is important to kind of note that. That's actually one of the perks of having an account in the first place. So I'm going to leave it unpinned for the moment. That way it's just interactable. And I can even like toss it and it kind of like floats up and eventually falls down. So that's kind of nice. But yeah. So there's plenty of other options as well. There's like avatars. So you can actually create any of these avatars and put it into the room as well. And say I was like interested in using it, I could actually use the avatar or maybe save it for later, stuff like that. But I'm going to just delete it for the time being. But it's just basically allows people to actually wear the avatar or kind of just update themselves. You can share scenes. Essentially, you can actually create links to any of these other rooms. So if I were to do like interdimensional art gallery, it'll essentially allow me to change this whole room and reflect this one now. So I clicked on use scene and it's already changing it for me. And sometimes if it does load a little slow when it comes to this kind of change, you can always just refresh and usually it'll just load for you much easier. But you know, as you can see, it was pretty seamless for me at this point. And I can interact with this room. And any objects that you already had will eventually also be in here. They'll all still be kind of located here. And you can actually see a list of objects right here on the upper right. And you can see all the images and stuff that were already embedded in here, but also the other ones as well. So if I was kind of curious to see where this thing ended up being, because obviously the room changed, I can actually press the view button and it'll show me that it actually went underneath the world, which is not good. But you can always delete it and then just put it back wherever you want it to be. But yeah, let's see. So essentially, yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff here. The reason why I'm able to actually float through here is actually because I clicked on the the fly option. So if you ever want to like basically fly through the whole room, because normally you would just kind of default like just walk like normal, you can actually press the G key on your keyboard, and you can already see on the bottom right or bottom left here, it was fly mode enabled. And I can basically just fly and float through the entire thing using the WASD keys or the arrow keys, just kind of looking down just to float down, stuff like that. And if I ever want to reset myself back to the floor, that's easy enough. You could just press the G again, G key, and it automatically resets me back to the nearest like kind of floor plan it can find. So in this case, it kind of found this area. So yeah, and that's also another important thing. If you ever do find yourself at any point like kind of lost or like, kind of like falling through the floor or anything like that, you could probably just press the G keys and it'll probably reset you back to somewhere a little bit more stable here instead of falling through the world. But yeah, also with the G key, not only does it allow you to fly, it also allows you to basically, in like gamer vocab, clip through objects. So like I can't like move through this floor right now, but if I press the G and I float down, I can clip through it. And same with all this other stuff here. So, but that's with the fly mode activated. If I deactivate it, everything kind of becomes solid again. It looks like I actually fell through a table. So, but I can easily get myself out of it. But yeah, so there's stuff like that. So you can change scenes as needed to any of these other ones that you might be interested in. I'll put back onto the gathering hall one. But yeah, and you can also just upload objects as well. So I'm going to click out of here of that objects list. And basically you can upload, it says like more like JPEGs and PNG files, MP4 files. So if you have like a video file of some sort, you can actually upload that. You can actually upload audio files as well. And they basically can be played here. Actually, I have an example. Say like you have a presentation or something like that in like a PowerPoint presentation, you just convert it over into a PDF. You can actually click and drag it. And it should start uploading right here. So you can see I actually have the Hubs Mozilla guide that I created. I can even go through the different pages. And again, you can make it larger if you need to for any reason. So yeah, so people can actually see it. So you can actually do like full presentations in this room, which is kind of cool, which I really like. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, basic stuff like React. There's like emoji reactions that you can pop up. So you can actually interact with these. They'll eventually disappear on their own. There's a chat function here, which kind of shows some other stuff that's happened, but it's basically where you can do like text, essentially, text-based chat with people. Obviously the leave function, if you ever do want to leave the room, if you kept the link to this room, you can always go back to it. You just have to put it back in your browser tab or through your phone or anything like that. And you can always return to it, but that's the official leave. Essentially what happens with this room is that it will always exist. Like it's a perma room of sorts. So as long as you have the link, you can always re-enter it. But if you ever did want to close a room, like you wanted to make sure that no one could enter it, even if they did have the URL, there is a way to do that. And I'll show that. But essentially on the more button here, I'm not really sure how to describe this ever, but the 3 dots icon on the bottom right, you'll see some additional settings and features. There's like the sign in or sign out if you ever wanted to sign out for any reason. You can create a new room. You can change your name and avatar, as I've kind of illustrated too. So this is another way you can do that. You can favorite a room. So you can actually also make sure that you keep this room in your kind of like your account. You can actually favorite the room. So you can see I have a few others that I have here and I can easily teleport them if I ever wanted to. You can also do preferences. So these are your personal preferences in terms of the audio controls and miscellaneous stuff. Most of the default stuff is fine, actually. Like the one I usually do click on, though, is the mute microphone on entry. And again, those preferences will only be saved if you have an account for yourself. You can also do rooms info and settings. So essentially this will give you a little bit more control. If you're the one who created the room, you'll have a lot more settings here. So it'll recognize you as the host if you've logged in and everything like that. So yeah, you can change the name, you can even change the scene. And the way to do that is by doing the edit button here. And basically you can change the scene, kind of like similar to how I kind of showed before, kind of like this. And this will change it for everyone immediately. You can also do a show name, or I'm sorry, a room name, and you can actually edit this. So I can just say meeting place, or you can call it whatever you want. You can give a description if you'd like to of the room. So the room size, this is going to be a really important feature to note, is that there is a limitation on how many people can be in the room and interacting with it at the same time. Basically, Hubs Mozilla basically kind of defaults to the max of like 24, 25 people max. The reason for that is that they found that is the best number of people to keep. Mainly for making sure that no one has any problems like loading into the room and stuff like that. It kind of just keeps the capacity a little bit more manageable for everyone, especially if people are joining from their phone or from a VR headset and such. Usually computers do probably the best in terms of being supported on here, if you ever have if you ever want to know that. But you can easily maximize it all the way up to 50 people. But beyond, like, it can't go anywhere beyond that. Essentially what happens for anyone who is like, the 51st person, like, or beyond that, instead of having the option to join the room, they'll have the option to spectate, and they'll just have kind of just like this bird's eye view of the room, and they can hear everything, but they can't say anything. They can't interact in any meaningful way. And as soon as someone gets out, it should give you a button to actually join the room if there's room available. But yeah, but in terms of the spectate role, you might be wondering, well, is there a limit on that? According to Mozilla Hubs, there is no hard limit on that. Apparently, I think they said like if it goes above 100 people, it can start kind of affecting things. But again, that's a pretty good number, honestly. And again, like if you have like at least 100, like if you have about 150 people, 50 of them being able to kind of interact while the others kind of spectate, I think that's totally fine. I mean, given the amount of options you get here. You can also do room access. So this isn't one of the ways where you can create a little bit of security. Obviously, like I said, if they don't know the link to the room, they will never be able to enter it. But you can do a shared link, like I've kind of illustrated with the invite button, but you can also do an invite only. So this is essentially creating a special link where you can actually revoke it at a later time. Essentially, if you do revoke it, basically anyone who did have the URL but did not join the room yet would not be able to enter. But anyone who's currently in the room would still be able to do that, be able to interact and still exist in the room. But as soon as they leave, that link won't work for them. Stuff like that. You can also create some room member permissions. And again, this is as the host for most of these options here. You can actually limit if people can create and move objects. You can actually turn that off. You can even limit a little bit more if you don't want them to pin objects. So anything that they created, it'll eventually disappear and they can't like save it or keep it there. That'll be disabled. You can also disable drawings. So if you don't want them to use that pen where I was drawing that 8, you can do that as well. And create emoji, allow flying, so that clipping that I was talking about in any of those. Oftentimes when I'm creating a room where I don't want people to necessarily kind of mess with the flow of the room in terms of creating objects and such, usually I'll turn this off. I'll turn off the drawings and I'll turn off the flying, but I'll allow people to create the emojis. Those disappear within seconds and they don't really affect anything. So, and then you just press apply, essentially right there. But for me, I'm actually going to just re-edit that and be able to create things and draw things. That way you can all can all do that. But yeah, let me share the link in the chat. And yeah, let me see. Actually, before I do that, I want to make it to where it's open whenever, so like it won't be revoked. That way, maybe we can also keep this room as something on the Lily page. That would work too. But yeah, actually, let me fix that. I forgot to apply. There we go. And invite. Cool. So let me put this in the chat. And at this point, feel free to join the room. I'll also answer any questions in the meantime on the chat. I saw a lot of chats, so.
Okay. Yeah, so we've had a couple of questions.
Sure.
You've answered the first one, I think, pretty well about is there a way for the host to exert more control over how participants are admitted? So I think having the link helps with that. But is there sort of like a waiting room?
So yeah, I think the waiting room would essentially be the spectate room. Essentially, you could just join there and that'd be fine. You know, like I said, there's no real hard limit on that. And again, if as people leave the room, like stop interacting with it and just kind of officially leave the room, it'll create the option for other people to join. So I don't think it actually goes by order though. I think as soon as like the option appears, it appears for everyone. So that is kind of the one wrinkle to that.
And are the accounts free?
Accounts are free. Yeah, everything's free. This is an open source platform. So essentially, yeah, it pretty much is a free option for everyone. As long as you have a consistent, stable internet connection, you're pretty much good to go. And as long as you have a computer, a phone, or a VR headset of some sort.
Can you only use the preset rooms, or can you design your room? So can you like reflect your library space?
Yeah, you definitely can. There's actually a lot more options when it comes to that. I didn't cover it here because I think that would actually be another session, which I'd be more than happy to do. But there's actually another tool beyond just hubs here that you can actually edit the room, because there might be times when you come across like certain elements here that you don't really want to show per se. And there's some ways you can kind of hide them, but obviously you probably wouldn't be able to really hide this because you can't delete it. It's part of the room itself because it's part of the what they call a scene. It's the environment that was already pre-existing and created by someone else. But there is a way to do that. It's through a developer tool, and it's also free. It's kind of different in the way it interfaces, but once you kind of get used to it, I've had a lot of fun with it. You can basically delete stuff here. You can remake everything pretty much. You can reestablish the whole environment here. You can create more stairs. You can create walls. You can do whatever you want essentially on that room. But the developer tool is called Spoke. As a quick look through, I'll just show where you can actually access it. If you go back to the Hubs main site here, there's actually an option for Spoke. That's basically where you can create stuff. Like I said, I won't talk about too much about like how it works because again, that would probably take up way too much time. But essentially, if you use the get started here, you can see a bunch of other things I've been starting to create. And I can actually implement all the different stuff I want and establish it here. One of them I'll show is the Labyrinth in a bit, but yeah.
So it would be possible to upload a 360 image of your actual library.
Yeah, technically, basically, oh, I can hear my audio. One moment. So I can mute all if I wanted to. So I'm going to, there we go. But yeah, so essentially, what you would need to do is in the Spoke version, you can actually upload the 360 image and just place it in place of this whole like sandy dunes type of scene here. And basically you create it there. So hopefully that makes sense on that end. But it would have to be through Spoke. It wouldn't be through here. You couldn't do that here.
Okay. So the next question is, how are you using Hubs Mozilla for library instruction? Is that going to be like the cognitive bias Labyrinth?
Can you repeat that question again? I'm sorry.
How are you using this for library instruction?
Oh, yes. So I can actually kind of show that actually. Let me change the scene really quick for everyone. So on my end, I'm going to go to the more options, and I'm going to go over to preferences, or actually, I'm sorry, room info and settings. So yeah, I can see people are already drawing stuff and whatnot. That's awesome. But if I wanted to change the scene, I can totally do that. And basically, I have a few scenes of my own that I've created, like I've shown. So in addition to all these basic ones that have been created by other people, it's been also created by Hubs and Mozilla. You can also go to my scenes, and these are the ones I published through Spoke. So I'm going to do the cognitive bias in Labyrinth. 4.0, it's just because I've been updating it quite a bit every so often. So, but we're going to change the scene for everyone. So it's going to take a moment to load. If it kind of doesn't load in a bit, just refresh. And again, this is one thing to stress here is that this particular area is going to have a few more graphics and a few more models that I've like personally put in there. So it might be a little longer to load versus someone else.
What is the learning curve for Spoke?
Spoke. Yeah, I probably, that's a really good question. So basically for Spoke, I would probably say it took me to get a good handle it, probably a month, just to kind of get really used to all the features and the way you kind of interact with the environment. Because the way you would interact with here is not quite the same way. You can't move with the movement keys that I've talked about, and so again, it's kind of more of a behind the scenes kind of developer tool where you can. But yeah, I would say it didn't take me too long to get the basics, but yeah, like I said, maybe I can offer to do a Spoke tutorial for another show and tell.
We have a comment that the audio is doubled up. Can you mute?
Yeah, I can hear that. Let's see. Let's see if I can mute people. Let's see. Interesting. This is kind of new for me as well. The mute option usually works for everyone, but it seems like it's. But you know what? I'm gonna fly actually. That way you don't hear me. There we go. That way we get a good, nice view of this. How's that? Okay, yeah, that seems like it's a lot less. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. So yeah, essentially this is kind of the labyrinth that I've established here. And this is probably a really good example of using it for instructional purposes. So originally I created this as an asynchronous activity for people that kind of navigate and be able to answer certain questions that they learn about cognitive bias and how it relates back to the literature search. So as you kind of navigate it, or as you see it, basically you'll be able to actually like go through the entire labyrinth, and there's a correct path to get there, and you basically have to answer certain questions that I've put in there. And the wrong answers, if you go through the wall or anything like that, it'll have a GIF that says, like, pretty much indicating that it was the wrong answer of some sort, and maybe try again. So it's kind of a fun way of kind of establishing that. So you can basically kind of work your way through the entire labyrinth, answering the questions as needed. And so this one in particular is more of like an activity per se, rather than like a learning object. It doesn't necessarily have like the information to pass through the whole labyrinth. Basically, for my purposes, I have a module that kind of covers all that information to where they could answer all of this. But I've actually recently used this more for a live synchronous event. And actually it was pretty fun for the students. So basically I kind of covered everything I would talk about in terms of cognitive bias when it comes to the literature search. And then I just let them have free reign of interacting with this. And luckily I had very small classes, so it wasn't too bad. But yeah, it was a really fun kind of project. So this one I completely created through Spoke. It probably took me, it took me a bit. I don't know. I don't remember the full amount of time, maybe about like 2 or 3 weeks, mainly just more for because of the Labyrinth complexity. I was trying to make sure that the answers are, in the correct pathway, stuff like that. And also creating the graphics as well for the questions and answers and such. I created through Canva, just downloaded them and uploaded them into Spoke, and basically were able to do that as well. But yeah. Any other questions or anything I can clarify about this particular?
So what type of feedback are you getting?
Yeah, so for this one, I got really good feedback so far. One, they did find it a really fun way to get for a live synchronous event. That was actually one of the top comments I got for that particular type of event that I've hosted a couple times. And actually, one of the things I do need to embed in here is a survey link, so I can actually really get a better evaluation of this particular project. So what I'm thinking of to do is at the end of the Labyrinth, once you complete it, I'll provide a link to a survey form. And that's what you could do with any of your rooms. If you ever do need to take like attendance, or if you ever do need to do some sort of survey of some sort, you can actually link anywhere you want it within the room. And this doesn't have to be limited to Spoke. You can actually do this with just any of the rooms you created. Like I showed, you can upload files and websites and such. You can direct them to maybe a SurveyMonkey thing. You can direct them to a Microsoft Teams type of link for surveys, or Google surveys as well. Yeah, any of those would be totally fine. If you ever do need to take like attendance and stuff like that, because yeah, unfortunately you won't have like a record of like all the people here. I know that kind of went beyond what the question originally was, but yeah, I mean, so far the reaction has been pretty positive actually. And the other things that I'm looking into doing is like exhibits as well. I've already started pretty much finalizing that, but I just didn't want to show it here yet because it wasn't fully finessed. There's probably a couple hiccups with it I need to work with, but yeah, it's been really great, and I've been really excited about integrating in different ways in different parts of the library here.
Could it be done like asynchronously? Like, so could you create a room? Do you have to be in the room, hosting the room for someone to come in and go through the Labyrinth?
That's a great question. So yeah, like I kind of alluded to before, I did actually create this room originally as an asynchronous activity. So you don't, as the host, have to be here. You can just provide the link. You can embed the code, like I mentioned too. And I think that should actually work with like Blackboard and Canvas if you're using those particular platforms with the embed code. But like for me, actually, I just created like a graphic of like kind of like a movie poster graphic of like escape the cognitive bias labyrinth, and basically hyperlinked it to this room, and people can just interact that way. And that's also a really neat way of also with the room limit. Like if you ever do need to create a limit on the amount of people there. So for me, I didn't like, you can make it more collaborative. So you can allow for like up to 24 people, or if you want it to be more of a single player type of experience, you can just limit to one person, and then anyone waiting has to kind of just spectate for the time being. But,
yeah. I noticed that a few people in the chat are having trouble get in. So it's something that afterwards, like later today, they can come back to your Labyrinth.
Oh yeah, totally. Actually, that was one of the things I'm going to promise to share actually is in addition to all the slides and the recording on Lily, I can definitely provide the link as well to this cognitive bias labyrinth. That's probably one thing I probably should stress more is like, yeah, if you're having a hard time entering at the moment, you know, that's totally understandable. If you're going through like Zoom and through this particular room, that might be causing the connectivity issues, or just any sort. Like I said, this is a much more complex room versus the other one. And so there's a lot more graphics, there's a lot more models that are being embedded. So that's probably requiring more of your computer, your device to load things. So apologies for that.
All right, do we have any other questions before we end? I think that's it. So thank you, Matthew. So don't be surprised if I contact you later about a spoke.
Yes, yeah, I'd be totally excited. I was actually thinking about it this week about it. I was like, man, maybe I should like propose one. Yeah, I'd totally communicate with you about that.
Well, it's good to see what's possible.
Mhm.
And, I already have some ideas of how I could use this in my instruction. So
Oh
I
yeah.
think it's nice this is kind of like the bait to get us excited, and then you can show us the spoke.
Yeah, totally. I think this is such a really exciting way of like going beyond like, Zoom or anything like that. Like sometimes, you want to make something a little bit different, a little bit more interactive. And I do think with Hubs, if you just stick with just the Hubs part of it, not necessarily Spoke, you can still really create some really fun spaces. Whether it's for like story time, whether it's for book clubs, whether it's for exhibits, like I've mentioned before. I'm actually looking into other things for like outreach and engagement with people. But I definitely think like kind of like similar to this particular activity, you can also make it for instruction purposes, both asynchronous and synchronous. So I think there's a lot of potential with this, even beyond what I'm thinking about. So, but yeah, excited to share it.
All right. So thank you. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Thank you, Matthew. I will have the recording sent out probably within 48 hours. So definitely by the end of the week, I will have the recording for everyone. And then Matthew, if you want to send me your slides and the link, I'll send that all together at once.
Perfect. I will do so.
All right, thank you.